Fitting in with people often requires you to be what they want you to be. Fitting in with Jesus requires you to believe in who he is. This is episode 6 with Summerlin Van Dyke, and together we gather.
Shut up and sit down.
Hey, welcome to In Process, where we gather to remind one another what Jesus has done, what Jesus is doing, and what Jesus will do. People invest in what they believe in, so show us if you believe in what we're doing by clicking that thumbs up. Gather with us regularly by clicking that subscribe button. Enjoy.
All right, welcome back to episode 5 or 6. And last time we talked about how people, whether they were believers or not, reflected the glory of God, reflected the image of God. The image of God, not necessarily the glory of God. Well, in some ways, the glory of God as well, in their character and nature, right? Reflecting his character is still the glory, right? But I thought maybe this time we would get into a little bit of some of the false things that people were believing, including yourself, on the trail. And maybe so that you and I could be reminded of how we could put our hope in, not in false gods, but in the real, true, and living God. And how easy it is just to slip and slide into false God worship and belief and idolatry. And so that we could be reminded of putting our hope in him instead. And so, anyway, so as you were going along on the trail, we've already connected a little bit about, or brought forth some of those things. I remember one of the things that you said was a goal accomplishment. Was that one of them?
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's something that came out in my personality that I didn't realize was a false god of mine that I had a tendency to fall towards. But yeah, it was my focus on just accomplishing the goal, and kind of pushing for that to happen no matter the circumstances. And so setting my mind to something and then really going after it. But I just didn't realize how much of a focus that was, and how much I pushed aside, I guess, in order to do that.
So when I was younger and people would talk about idolatry and false gods, I couldn't wrap my head around it. It was hard for me because I saw the old school images of worshiping the totem pole or, and
golden cow.
The golden cow or something. And I was like, I don't even get it. I don't have anything like that in me. And so for somebody who may not be totally understanding what we mean by idolatry or an idol is thou shall not have any other God before me. Help us understand a little bit why maybe is a better way of looking at this. You accomplishing a goal would be more important than you achieving a goal would be that you would look to that to give you happiness or satisfaction in a way that God was designed to, but that you return to that instead. Tell me a little bit about the inner workings of that.
Yeah. So just kind of more what false god looked like as
what did it do for you, or why do you think you turned to it, or
I'm not I think my personality has a tendency to turn to it, which I didn't realize until I started doing, actually when I started working to save money for the trail. And then when I got on the trail, I think it escalated. But it was just, I was putting my hope in accomplishing the trail. And that looked very mentally, I was putting my hope in it. I don't know how to describe it super well, but just like my happiness, my joy came from the success or failure of where I got on trail.
Right.
And so that I think was very telling of how the accomplishment or the goal of finishing or completing the trail was definitely like it changed where I was at, like emotionally or mentally.
Yeah, and so like if your hope is in the weather,
Yeah.
and you're a sunny day kind of person, if it's sunny outside, you'll be up, and if it's rainy and cloudy, you'll be down.
Right.
If you're hitting your goals, you're up. If something distracts you from that, you get down, and it literally moves you, even though you call yourself a Christian. And at that time, I think that you probably would have, but you certainly didn't have the understanding and trust in God that you do today, back then. But you probably still would have called yourself a Christian, but yet here you are rising and falling, not based on Christ. You're rising and falling based on your goals.
Yeah. Yeah. And that rising and falling, I think definitely was not just based on trail goals. I think there was other gods involved.
Yeah.
But I think that was a big one when I was on trail, was the accomplishment of it.
Yeah, so I want to hear more about that. So think a second about that. But I just want to kind of build out a little bit. So I remember for a really long time, my walk, I would have really good days and I'd have really bad days, and really good days and really bad days. My Christian walk on a daily basis, like as I was going through every day, I'd be really high and really low. And some people would say, well, it's fine to have highs and lows. And sure, to a degree, yeah, it is. But the reason why I was having highs and lows is because I was basing my hope on whether I behaved well or not. And so if I behaved well, then I was up. If I was a good boy, if I was doing the right Christian things, then I would be up. And if I would go to porn, or if I would steal, or if I would lie, or if I would, whatever,
Turn to drugs, turn to alcohol.
Yeah, whatever it was. And a lot of those things, some of those things were, as I proclaimed, well, I think for the most part, my whole life, I called myself a Christian, for the most part. But and so it was all based on my behavior, not on Jesus's behavior. So now today, when my behavior isn't what I know that God would have it be, my hope is in his behavior, not on mine. And so my Christian walk went from going up and down based on me being fickle, or based on my wife being fickle, based on finances being super fickle, up and down, based on a job, up and down, right? Whether we have a car or not, whether my life is smooth and comfortable or difficult and problematic. And of course, some of those things can still riddle me. If there's a lot of turmoil in my life, I have this tendency still to start to realize that I'm fighting, and then I'm fighting. What am I fighting? And then I realize, oh, nothing, because I have life for eternity. Any circumstance, good or bad, doesn't really make me happy or give me joy or make me down. I still don't necessarily like those circumstances, but they don't have to crush me like they used to. They don't have to defeat me like they used to.
And that's the piece of whether it's a God or not to you.
Yeah.
It's your hope. It's where your hope is.
Yeah.
So therefore, if they don't have to crush you and take you down anymore because your hope isn't in those things, though they affect you still,
right,
that's not where you're placing your hope. So
Yeah.
I think that's the huge difference between it.
For sure.
That I've been understanding more so.
I like that clarity. So you said there was a lot of other gods. So what other things ruled and reigned in your life? What other things dictated you or others?
Yeah. So me personally, I look at accomplishing the trail as a big one. And then another big one that I see that kind of branches off into smaller things, is fitting into the culture. And that I would say branched off into how I acted in a lot of different ways. What I gave into, what I didn't, how I performed.
Yeah. So open that up a little bit. So there's a culture on trail, and it's not the fruit of the culture isn't from belief in Christ. the fruit of the culture is belief in what?
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
But to a
So
degree.
what are some things that you think it is?
That trail can be an escape. That
Yeah.
trail can be a focus. That it can be trail within itself can be renewing.
Control, probably. I'm in control
Yeah.
of my own life. I
Yeah.
get to decide what I want to do on a daily basis.
Yes, that's a big one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
And
a
so,
lot of the ones.
and so you would see that manifest itself in what kind of ways? What was the fruit of those beliefs
In me?
in you or others? And so, like, what you started this off by saying, a false god that you had is pleasing others or going along with other people.
Yeah.
And then so you started doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And so I was just hitting the core and root of that right off the bat.
Gotcha.
Why people were doing those kind of things, what they were looking for, and what the fruit of it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for me personally, I think none of those things I said necessarily applied to why I was doing it. And I don't know if other people necessarily were putting their hope in that fitting in piece because of trail. I don't know necessarily. But like I was, and that wasn't a new thing for me though. That was a thing that I had been doing pretty regularly throughout my life, I would say.
So fitting in.
Yeah.
And so fitting in to you at home looked like what?
Right. So here's where it is interesting, is that
super interesting.
Fitting in at home looked like it very behavioral, really, for me, but it was doing what my parents asked me to.
Yeah.
It was, whether that was going into scripture or whether that was just getting home on time, or whether that was, having good communication or
being a good girl.
Yeah, really. And
do
so,
good things, don't do bad things.
Right. Yeah, and so that was, which was kind of conflicting because I didn't,
always know.
Right, and my friends didn't always do that, and so of course, it's conflicting when you have a lifestyle like that, I guess.
Yeah.
But
where it's not coming out of your belief, it's coming out of somebody else's.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I remember very specifically there was moments that you and I had where I would give you freedom and you didn't want freedom. You wanted me to tell you what to do. Yeah. And I said, no, I want you to do what you desire to do. And then I want to help you with whether or not that's a healthy thing. And then you would do what you wanted to do. And then I would correct you. And that was very confusing to you. Yeah. Because you're like, well, do you want me to do what I want to do? or do you want me to do what you want to do?
I didn't understand that piece of freedom. I really didn't. Totally. I just was so clueless to the piece of Jesus' freedom. And looking back, it's laughable. Yeah. For sure. But at the time, it was super frustrating. It was just I knew I just wanted to be able to comprehend it. Yeah. And I literally couldn't. I was just like, what is he doing? I don't understand. Yeah. But so at home it looked very much so like me fitting. And that's why the freedom piece was so hard, is because it was like, oh, do what you're going to do. And then after that.
And during part of that time, I didn't really understand gospel freedom either. Yeah. I still believed a lot, in large part, that Christian behavior was on my shoulders, not on Jesus's. Yeah. And so that I willpowered myself a lot, which wasn't really working in a lot of ways. But so then that would manifest and overflow to you kids. And so then well, I'm a good Christian and you should be too, because God's real and true. And we all agree with that. Right. And so we should all do what he wants us to do. But what happens when you don't, and when you don't want to do those things? And so it was all a bit conflicting, but then somewhere along there, I started understanding a lot more of the freedom piece. And and then helping you to understand that too. And Jesus then, of course, was working through me, but also working through others and other aspects in your life, including this trail that you went off on. And so fitting in at home looked like maybe reading the Bible like you were supposed to, though you probably didn't necessarily want to.
Mm-mm.
It wasn't
or
giving...
do it a lot.
Right. And it wasn't necessarily giving you life when you would, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's kind of miserable.
Yep.
Right? It's like, I'm supposed to do this.
It was hit or miss. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like God wasn't speaking to me through his word.
Right.
And so, like, there is that. But it was like hit or miss, which, like, why?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's something going on there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
God still was using it. It just, I wasn't allowing him to fully infiltrate. And so then obviously that is going to create issues.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so then you take a year off and you work for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So what did fitting in look like while you were working?
Yeah. So this is interesting too. I worked at a Christian coffee shop.
Yeah.
And so that obviously was sort of like I had been fitting in previously.
Yeah.
Just like at home. And in high school, all my friends were pretty similar to that behavioral fitting in, I guess.
Yeah.
It looked like Christianity and stuff like that. But at work, it was very dependent on who was there. I would say I was always a very like good worker in,
Yeah.
Yeah. That didn't change necessarily, but my like the things I talked about basically with others and the actions I chose were very different depending on who was
You were
there.
never like stealing money from the till or
I wasn't,
or showing up wasted drunk
behaviorally,
or any of those kind of things.
It was the same.
Yeah, it looked like you were doing well.
Right. Yeah.
No matter who you were fitting in.
Yeah. No matter who I was with at work.
Yeah, you were doing a good job or what
at.
was expected of you.
Mm-hmm.
However, your heart wasn't in it. And so some of the conversations, if somebody would have showed up and heard, and you and a coworker were there, they didn't know you didn't know they were there, which wouldn't mean that you were doing a good job. But anyway, and you guys were having a conversation, it very well would have been hit or miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have looked. So the owners of the coffee shop were Christians. And I worked with them often. And so then my speech or what I talked about or whatever was, about relatable things to that.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the other people working there were like college students who were just like, not living for Jesus to different degrees and different ways and all of those things. And so it was just, I was relating to whoever was there and fitting into the conversation of whoever was there. So it wasn't necessarily my actions. It was more my conversation, but obviously it was what was coming out of my heart. So yeah. Yeah.
Because Jesus said what comes out of your mouth comes from the heart. Right.
Which is true.
Yeah, totally. And so, so then you get out on trail.
Yeah.
And what does fitting in look like there?
Yeah. Well, again, I think it depended on who I was around.
Right, because you started off with Waterboy. And Waterboy, you started off with
my mom.
You started off with your mother.
Which is definitely different. Yeah.
Yes. And so what did fitting in look like with your mother?
Yeah. And
that was a bit frustrating, right?
Yeah, and I think it was just frustrating because she couldn't keep up with the pace I was.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily having my mom there wasn't frustrating.
You loved having your mom there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It was conflicting though, because you were, though fitting in, this was the goal-orientated piece that was kind of messing with you.
Yes, totally. Yeah, for sure. And behavioral, I definitely like.
Yeah.
I was like ready to maybe like
be independent
and maybe like try some new things and not wanting my mom there to, trying new things that weren't necessarily, of Jesus. And I realized that
or at that time, because you're fitting in, of your mom. Yeah. These things weren't of your mom. And so then that instantly created a conflict.
Yeah.
You love your mom. but you don't really get why she does what she does, but you want to fit in, but you're goal oriented. You want to be independent. So it's just a world of
It was very
conflict.
conflicting. It was super,
Just
and actually,
brewing.
I would say that first few weeks was very conflicting, with having my mom there.
Yeah.
Just because, it was like so many different
Yeah.
behavioralism things trying to go on, and like,
Yeah.
I was in close quarters with everyone. So
Yeah, and she's still trying to figure it out too. Not trying.
Yeah.
I think she gets it at this point in time. But at that point, the gospel was fairly new to her as well. And so she was discovering, what does it look like to not do bad things, but for the right reason.
Right.
Not because you're trying to please God, but you're already pleasing because you put your hope in what he's done, not in what you do. And therefore, out of the overflow, the freedom that comes along with that, then what do you do? And so, so she's trying to maybe push her daughter a little bit to doing the right thing because she cares and loves you, but that's not right either. We're not called to push people into right behavior, right? And so, here she's conflicted as well, probably letting her daughter be free, not really wanting her daughter to be free, right?
yeah, totally.
Because she's mothering you. She's
Yeah.
wants to mother you into a good place, not a bad place,
Totally.
right?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you move away from, she gets off the trail, and Waterboy is the first person you really connect with, and he identifies as a Christian, and you
Yeah.
guys both know that fairly soon in
Yeah.
hiking together.
I would say.
And
We
so,
just like opened up about family life right away.
so fitting in around him was kind of comforting because you had independence. Here's a new way to look at things, different person. You didn't have to conform necessarily to this guy. And I have to do this because I'm your dad and I'm intrigued and I'm curious. But like, were you intimidated? He's older than you?
Yes, not a lot. But
Yeah.
like 2 years maybe.
Yeah. And you're
No, maybe 3 years.
sure you're attracted to the guy?
Yes.
Yeah. And so like now here's this guy who you have some shared similarity. You're independent, but yet you're still trying to fit in. Nice place to fit in.
It was
but
that beginning piece of the trail was super interesting because there was so many people, and like what fitting in looked like was very different. Like there was just so many people, and like you didn't really know who you were hiking with yet. I mean, this is like barely 100 miles in, which that sounds like a lot, but on average, sometimes it would only take us like a week to hike 100 miles. So so, and he was the one I was hiking with often. So there was different conflicting things there. Our conversations were usually very like deep and like sometimes like healthy, sometimes like not necessarily, whatever. We were just talking for a long time. But then action wise, like we're both very wishy-washy with our actions. And so, and we were both like attracted to each other. So romantically. So that also throws on a piece of like that there too. So
and so this is like a no holds barred podcast, and so it's important to not glorify things of old that we're now ashamed of, but not ashamed of because Jesus has freed us from all that. But we also aren't like proud of it by any means when we do things in darkness or whatever. But
before I think I know where you're going, but before you continue, just like like the things that I did on trail, I'm not proud of. Like I don't necessarily put that title on it for sure.
Right.
I mean, I'm a little proud of like hiking 2,000 miles, but
totally,
like so there's that. But like I wouldn't say
there's
the
nothing wrong
actions
with hiking a trail,
right? But like what I was gonna say is through that I understood God was working though, and so though I wasn't proud of those actions, I realized He was still super integrated into what was going on, and so I'm not, if that helps.
Yeah. So today you're able to today you're able to understand that God was using those things. He was giving you over to your own desires so that you could see that ultimately, though they may be temporarily great, they are going to cause death and destruction at some point
They're
in
not
some
super
way.
helpful.
They're not helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they don't build you up. They tear you down and all of that. And so curious as far as when you're with Waterboy, you're having conversations that are sometimes healthy, sometimes not, and sometimes your actions are healthy, sometimes not. Are you able to give any like sorts of examples, like just to be relatable more than anything? Because there's a lot of people who profess Christ and who don't, who potentially could be watching this, because even though it's just a conversation between me and you, we are broadcasting the thing and putting it out there, so other people could watch. What does that look like? So, because you call yourself a Christian, but really you're not actually putting your hope in Jesus. That's the whole point of this one.
Yeah.
That I'm picking up. And so what does that look like conversationally? What does it look like in action?
Yeah, we had a lot of different conversations. I think we talked about how we were like, how our family dynamic was at home a lot was where we kind of started talking about a lot. Just like what his family dynamic was like, how he grew up, how he was raised, same with me. And so just the struggle that went on, he had some like struggles that were going on in his family life, and we talked about those. And like I had some struggles, not necessarily with my family life, but just like with coming out of it and like understanding more, learning more, growing more, I don't know, stuff like that. We had a lot of conversations about, I remember distinctly remember having a lot of conversations about like how church affected us, kind of. I don't know if that makes sense, but like his involvement,
what you thought was the church,
right? His involvement in different church-like things, missions, all that kind of stuff. My involvement in all that kind of stuff.
So he did some mission work.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But conversations like that, how the trail was going, what too obviously was like, and just like kind of where we were at mentally a lot would be our conversation as well. I mean, those are some examples. I don't even know. There was hours and hours.
Right.
You just like hiked a lot. So sometimes it was silent. Sometimes you're having tons of conversations.
Yeah. And action wise, sometimes you were just being healthy and hiking the trail and eating whatever. Other times you're just like grubbing out on food, maybe maybe drinking, getting drunk. You got into drugs a bit.
Yeah.
Right. And so there was those maybe conversation wise, conversations getting south, not being healthy, helpful, glorifying, tearing things down, people down, stuff down, gossip, whatever.
Yeah. And there is an aspect or a dynamic of, high concentration of males hiking the trail to a very low concentration of females hiking the trail. And so there's that dynamic of like the guys like opening up about what's going on in their heads with like females and stuff like that. And so that was always, I would say that was definitely unhealthy conversations that came out a lot.
Yeah, just a lot of like sexually predatory, aggressive type of stuff, right? Not
to a degree.
Not considerate, uplifting, lovely, pure, respectful. Yeah. More consuming, consumption, disrespectful. Yeah.
So that was
So wow, time has absolutely flown by, and we will pick up where we are leaving off. Let's continue this conversation for next time.
Sweet.
Does that work for you?
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Look forward to it.
Sweet.
All right.
Feeling provoked, angered, encouraged, inspired by what you heard? Don't keep it to yourself. Comment below. Put your supportive beliefs into action by clicking all the clicky stuff. Lastly, gather with those around you and remind one another what Jesus has done, is doing, and will do.